I always knew that it was not going to be easy to establish a warm, intimate relationship because there was such a difference between our political and cultural environments. But I knew the importance of the relationships, as did my ministers, because it was obvious then that Indonesia was going to become one of the world's biggest economies and that we should have good relations with them. So it was always a chance because within the Indonesian framework there were people who didn't have the best of intentions either towards Australia or others in the region. And so we had to be aware of that, but I think we handled it reasonably well.
Does it concern you to see what's playing out now with the current Australian government and the Indonesian government?
Well, yes, it's been unfortunate for Tony Abbott and his government that they sort of inherited a problem which arose under the previous government in terms of the tapping of the President's phone and the President's wife's phone. So it's unfortunate for in that sense. I think they could have handled it somewhat better, but I do believe that there was a genuine interest on the part of the President of Indonesia and those around him to not take advantage of this situation, but to try and move positively towards a resumption of a warmer relationship. I certainly hope that that happens.
On the economy, in 1986, you were surprised when your Treasurer Paul Keating warned Australia could become a banana republic without sensible economic management. Looking back, do you think now that it was the right thing for Paul Keating to issue that warning?
Yes, looking back, and it was soon after that I had the same view too, that it was Paul using pretty dramatic language, which he's accustomed to doing occasionally. But I've always had the view that an important part of sensible economic management is that the population understand the facts and the economic challenges confronting them. And this was a pretty dramatic way of letting the Australian people know that we still had a lot of problems.
And just predating these cabinet records, the Button Plan on car manufacturing came out. It's credited with opening up the market, but did it also lay the foundations for car makers to eventually move out of a high-cost, high-wage economy like Australia?
Well, we've got to face the fact here in Australia that we can't expect that we're going to be able to maintain an across-the-board manufacturing capacity when we're confronted with competition from other low-wage countries which have a huge advantage, huge comparative cost advantage. The big challenge for us in Australia is to concentrate on having an education and training system which is going to equip people to be able to take part in the new sunrise industries. And it's very interesting to me to read in the paper just from the last 24 hours or so that an Australian entrepreneur is talking about taking over the plants of the car makers who leave to set up one of these new sunrise industries. That's the thing we've got to do. Don't delude ourselves that we can maintain the complete framework of manufacturing industry.
Can I take you to 1987? You were seeking a third term in office and there were moves to parachute Bjelke-Petersen into Canberra as your opponent. What did you make of his ambitions?
It was very hard to think of anyone less well equipped to become Prime Minister of this country, but I thanked him from the bottom of my heart because he certainly created a lot of trouble and disconcerted the Conservative side of politics enormously. So thanks, Joe. It was a good move, mate.
In the end, your opponent was John Howard, and Paul Keating was able to trip him up on his figures before the election. Do you have Paul Keating to thank in great part for that election win?
No, look, the finding out of the hole in the figures came from the department, the Treasury and Finance. They found it, and Paul, as their spokesman, was able to put it, make that public. We were going to win that election, but that certainly was the icing on the cake. There's no doubt that it would have helped to increase the numbers that we got, I think. But we had two things going for us. We had a very, very good economic and social record to take to the people, and as has been clear in a previous answer, you had an opposition in disarray. So we're going to win. That very bad mistake that John Howard made in the compilation of his figures and which was revealed by the department and announced by Paul, was certainly a help.